Alright, this lecture is going to be on the human eye, how and why we see light and color. We'll start off by looking at the eye itself. That the process of seeing color within the human eye we'll start off with the pupil. The pupil both dilates and contracts based on the available light. We talk about dilation. If it's dark out, the pupil needs to dilate. It needs to open up. In other words, literally the black pupil in your eye is going to allow for more light when it's dark. So that light then can come in and then be let's just say refracted through the lens. But if it's really bright out, your pupil is going to contract. So the pupil is going to determine how much light gets into the eye. You don't want too much because it can do damage. So as it travels through the lens, it refracts. And it then bends the light so that it goes to one focal point, or the focus itself is then landing on your retina. That the retina is composed of, it's in the back part of the eye, it's composed of cones and rods. And these are your photoreceptors. They're picking up and interpreting that light. And your the cones are actually going to be your green, your red, and your blue. The blue's not in the picture. And these are going to be operating on determining the colors that are in whatever it is you're viewing, the photons that are reflecting off of the object to your eye. And then the rods are going to be determining the intensity. So there's a lot of rods. There's actually a lot more rods for intensity. And these pick up different shades and how bright or dark or dim the scenario is. But your cones are going to be involving color, and the rods are going to be determining intensity. And this all then communicates information to your optic nerve. And then the optic nerve is going to send that signal to your brain. And that's where you make sense of it. And this all happens extremely quickly. So once we get that light that's making its way into our eyes, we really talk about light in the form of photons. These are bundles of energy. That red light is composed of red photons. That I cannot separate red photons into anything different. That all red photons are that frequency at that wavelength. And therefore all blue photons are that frequency at that wavelength. Remember, blue is a higher energy, has a higher frequency. And we relate higher frequency to higher energy. And we would say that red is a lower frequency, right? We can see this quantity here. And is a lower energy. So photons are what carry the frequency of light that corresponds to its energy. So we can then apply this to our eyes, and they work due to the additive color process. That the additive color process involves red, green, and blue, and that's why your cones, as we talked about here earlier, right, green and red and the blue that's not shown, your cones are red and green and blue. That if you get red and green, you view that as yellow, and if you get green and blue, we view that as cyan. And therefore, blue and red mixed, we would see that as magenta. So we can talk about primary colors. The primary colors in the additive process are red and green and blue. And if I mix these three colors together, I get white light, or I get white, essentially. The secondary colors are the yellow, the cyan, and magenta. In complement, so what are complementary colors? Well, complementary colors are primary and secondary colors that add together, right, additive process, to create white. So red's complement is cyan. Remember, cyan is actually composed of both blue and green. So it's just like mixing red and green and blue, I get white. So blue's complement is yellow. Remember, yellow is composed of red and green, equal parts. And therefore, so blue and yellow are complements to add together to get white. And therefore, green's complement is magenta. So complementary colors are the primary and secondary that add together to get white light. So why is it we see green? So green from a leaf, it's only green photons that are, let's just say, signaling to your cones, your green cones, that the object is green. So in this case, if the brain gets a signal from the green cone, we see green. So let's talk about orange. Orange is kind of a unique one. A strong signal from red cones, right? Red and green make yellow. But orange isn't yellow. So if I get a strong signal from red and a weaker signal from green, it tells the brain that the fruit is orange. So it's like if there's a strong red signal and a weak green signal, we see it as orange. So orange is actually kind of a redder yellow. So here we look at the subtractive primary colors and the subtractive process. That magenta, yellow, and cyan are your primary colors in the subtractive process. And therefore red, green, and blue are the secondary colors in the subtractive color process. And if I mix a primary and a secondary, I get black. It means that all colors are absorbed. So magenta's complement is green, and yellow's complement is blue, and cyan's complement is red. And if I mix any of, if I mix magenta, yellow, and cyan together, all colors are absorbed. And all colors absorbed means a lack of color. Therefore, we call that black. And these are found in fabrics, dyes, paints. These all have pigments. And these absorb colors of white light and reflect others. So let's look at cyan for a second. Let's kind of put this to work. So we say that the sun generates white light, red, green, and blue. And we see these colors here. That the colors, remember, cyan right here is made up of blue and green. It's going to absorb red. And therefore, we only see green and blue make it to our eye. So we see this color as cyan, right? If green and blue photons make it to our eye, we view that as cyan. Let's look at yellow. So if I have red, green, and blue, right? White light from the sun. If it shines on yellow, yellow is going to, in this case, the yellow paint is going to absorb its complement of blue. And therefore, green and red are going to make it to our eye, and we're going to view that as yellow. So if I mix cyan and yellow together, they subtract both red and blue. So only green from the light remains. So creating the color green using cyan and yellow can be done by looking at what colors make it to our eyes. And we can view this very, very clearly on this picture here. So here's a way we can look at the subtractive color combinations. That red is a 1 part magenta, 1 part yellow. We could say that less magenta and more yellow can get us orange. We could say that 100% yellow gives us yellow, right? That makes sense. We have cyan and yellow can give us green. And smaller parts of cyan and magenta can give us violet. So if I look at these all together, if I mix these colors together, I get this muddy gray color. And really, if I add black ink or black pigment, I can actually get shades of gray. Black and grays are really the same thing. They're just different amounts of black pigment within there. So let's apply this concept. So I have the subtractive color process. Magenta, yellow, and cyan is my primaries, and red and green and blue is my secondaries. And by mixing a color, a primary in the subtractive process, and its complement, I get black. So let's apply that to inkjets, because inkjets are, if you buy ink for a computer or a printer, they're found in cyan, magenta, and yellow. And you also get black ink cartridges. So let's look at red. In order to make red, I can mix magenta and yellow. So let's see, if I mix magenta and yellow, right, look at these. Look at my secondary color is red. In order to get blue, I mix magenta and cyan. Well, let's look at it here. Magenta and cyan, I get blue. And in order to get green, I can mix cyan and yellow. If I mix cyan and yellow, I get green. So ink cartridges that work on the cyan, magenta, and yellow colors really obey the rules of the subtractive color process. So in conclusion, we can look at the additive color process where we're talking about light, and we can apply the process to set the subtractive primary colors, and if I mix them together, I get black because they're absorbing because of the pigments.